Flavor.
Yeah, boy!
Hey, yo, check 1, 2. This is Flavor Flav in the building for the Better Agency. Nicholas wants everyone to know how they need to listen to the truth that Nick and Preston are giving them. Flavor Flav shouting y'all out right now. You heard me? So hold it down and keep making it a better agency. Alright?
And welcome to this episode of the Better Podcast, where we are talking to insurance agents across the globe about how they're using... Start over. I didn't want to talk about Better Agency. And welcome to this episode of the Better Podcast, where we are discussing insurance, the sexiest topic known to man, with agency owners and agents from across the globe. My name is Nicholas Ayers. He is Preston Schmidley. What's going on, Preston?
What's going on? Glad to be here.
And today we got a treat. We're talking to J.C Wogomon from Indianapolis, or the Indianapolis area. He comes from the Holy Land, not too far away from South Bend, Indiana, where dreams come true. And J.C., welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Nick, it's a pleasure to be here, man. I actually grew up about 45 minutes from said Holy Land that you referenced, and I have to admit, man, me and the Irish, we're not fond of each other. But that's okay. I still like you.
When you're a Purdue fan, that makes a lot of sense. You wouldn't be too fond when you're on the backside of a woodshed every other year. It makes it hard to root for. I understand. So.
Yeah, it's can't wait.
Round one.
Can't wait to get you guys back on the schedule.
Right. Me too. We're always good to pin in a win, a W. So it's can't wait to have you guys there either. It helps our win column.
I have no defense. You are correct.
JC, thank you so much for joining us. Like I said, now you have been an agency owner for how long on the independent side?
This is my 13th month.
13th month. So you're just now collecting those renewal checks from those first couple months.
That's a sweet month. Month 13 is when it starts to get a lot more fun. If month 1 was good, at least.
I tell you, it's been a journey.
You start to see a little bit of the promise. There's the hope, right? Yeah. What is this 13 month? What have these 13 months look like for you? What have you had to not deal with, but what have you experienced in these last 13 months?
Well, you know, when a lot of people open an independent agency, a lot of them are coming out of a captive world usually, or breaking away from an existing independent agency. My story is a little different. I've come to the table with 10 years of experience as a captive agent, but then I got out of the industry completely. I even let my licenses lapse and expire for 8 years. I kind of didn't want anything to do with insurance. And after running into dead end after dead end after dead end and finding a lot of people that I didn't want to work for anymore, I was like, enough. I'm 40 years old. I need to plant my flag. I need to find something to build and carry into the future. And so when I was racking my brain trying to figure out what direction I wanted to go, the idea of insurance was always there because I did really well in it before. But seek humility or it will be delivered upon you was a lesson that I learned back in 2008 when I lost over $1 million of business in the captive world in a 12-month period. Oof. And so all of a sudden, I didn't like insurance very much anymore. And so I got away from it. So, trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And I decided to say, you know what, let's go back into insurance, but I can't do it for the sole purpose of making a bunch of money. That does not motivate me anymore. And that's just not going to last. When your back's up against the wall, everybody loves to read the rags to riches story. The guy that started with nothing and ended up with everything. Everybody loves that story, but nobody wants to read the book and the roller coaster that happens in between. And so I knew that if I was only doing it to make a bunch of money, that when things got tough, I would cut and run because I've done it before. And having learned from that, I had to have a greater purpose. And so I opened my agency from scratch. I opened the door and back in the industry after 8 years. And man, had a lot changed in the course of that 8 years. Let me frame it this way. When I left the insurance industry, I was using a BlackBerry. Okay.
Nice. That was a fun time. So let me actually, I love doing, this is kind of a unique thing where I feel like I can bond with some of the older heads in the insurance space because I remember having to do like drop by appointments and stuff like that before Garmin hit the streets. Like that was, I was selling early in the game. What era were you doing your captive agency? Like, are we talking like dot matrix printer? Are we talking like rate books? Like what?
Not that far back.
Okay.
I hit the field. I started training in 01, hit the field in 2002. So
Okay.
I had 3 huge lateral file cabinets in my 2-bedroom apartment. I had a Rolodex.
Okay.
I had a flatbed document scanner, which was like the latest and greatest. I had a 1 megapixel digital camera.
Woo!
The screen on it was about that big. And let's see, there were still payphones out. I had a cell phone, obviously, but there were still payphones. Had dial-up internet. I had to dial and sync every day. And then I'd have to take my signed documents. There was no e-signature then. So take the signed documents, mail them into the home office every day. And that's where it started. Now that had started to change when I got out of it. But there was no such thing as texting customers.
Right.
There was no automation, as we like to use the word.
Well, message rates may apply.
Right? I mean, I might fax somebody something, but.
Right. That's actually really cool because, this reminds me, I was in an Uber recently and I was driving with the driver. He just got a severance package from Verizon. He had worked with them for like 30 years. And we discussed like the whole history of him leaving recently in 2020 all the way back to 1990 with a company like Verizon. It's like, if you think about, I mean, you could have a museum filled with the technology and the evolution that happened in just those 3 decades of Verizon alone. Right. And so for me, it's really cool because you start talking about having a cell phone in the insurance industry in 2001, 2002, and the way you were doing it. I mean, it sounds like you were always trying to be an innovator. I mean, you were using what you had at your disposal at the time, but that's really cool. I mean, that for that era, that was pretty hip.
That was one of the driving forces as I look back on what prompted me to open an independent agency, was that I kept seeing the way things were done and knew that it could be done better. And I just got tired of running into, well, this is the way we've always done it.
Oh, I hate that.
And that goes across a lot of different industries, not just insurance.
Sure.
But I can't accept when something is a certain way that's not right and just running with it when it can be better. It's like underneath my fingernails kind of stuff, man. It just drives me nuts.
I'm with you.
What do you think in these last 13 months? So obviously the game probably changed a little bit since you were in it last. Right. I remember those days when I first started. I was sending. I thought it was really innovative when I was using our company fax machine to send black and white flyers, solicitations to auto dealerships. Like that was. So
you were that guy. Okay.
We there were some semblance. This was 2006, 2007. Fast forward now, these last 13 months, what do you think has been the biggest lesson that you've learned, or the biggest educational moment that came your way in this last year? What do you think that's been?
Well, people ask me all the time, hey, how's your business going? I'm like, well, it's an awesome 1-year unpaid internship.
Right.
I feel like after my first year, I'm just now opening my doors because I learned so much, and before I just flipped the switch and unlocked the door for the first time, I did so much pre-work. And, to be on a podcast like this to me is so amazing and humbling that people would actually want to hear what I have to say, because when I decided to open an agency, I was grabbing every podcast I could find to listen to get information and just learn and absorb and find out what the cutting edge is. And so in doing that, the first year I had to, okay, well, I guess the first thing I got to do is come up with an agency management system. So I'm like, I don't even know really what that is. As a captive, they give you the system, right?
Yeah.
So I don't even know what to look for. I knew I wanted my business to be paperless. I knew I wanted my business to be nimble and to be able to respond and to be able to react quickly and be able to be ran from anywhere, not knowing that a pandemic was coming. I kind of failed to write that into my business plan for my first year. But it just all played into it to where being nimble and being able to be on the go, and I can run my business from anywhere digitally, it just really played out to my advantage. But when it first started, you know, I got an agency management system. Okay. So that was the first thing. And then I tried to find one that had as many features in it as possible. So I got one. I don't love it, but I have one.
Sure.
And, you know, the more I got into it, they said, oh, this was, everything's in here, everything you're going to need, your messaging, your emails, your texting, your policy management, all of that stuff's in this one platform. But the more I got into it, the more I started to realize, yeah, technically it's in there, but it doesn't work very well. It's not easy to use. It's very cumbersome. And, you know, I have all of these things going on. I'm the chief everything officer, as I like to say. You know, I'm a one-man shop right now. And so I'm doing all policy servicing. I got to do all my automation design on the other end of the spectrum. I have all these things I have to do, one of which is still go sell, because nothing happens until a policy is sold. And so I didn't have time to really pound out how to make this all work. So I started adding technology pieces that were more efficient and more effective and easier for me to use. And it made my life so much easier. It's still a struggle at times just because I'm the only one, you know, and, but through technology and finding out what works and what doesn't work, learning from other people, you know, one of the things I do is I connect with a different agency owner every week, just to have a phone call.
Smart.
And anybody that listens to this podcast, man, I would love to connect with you to learn more about what you guys are doing and doing well, and we can learn something from each other. But just be a sponge. I've just been a sponge trying to gather it all, and I've made some mistakes. I've made some expensive mistakes, but
haven't we all?
I knew that was going to be part of the process, though. I don't get mad about it, you know.
Yes.
I learned a way not to do it, and that's valuable.
I tell people I didn't go to college, so I don't have any student loans or anything like that. But so whenever I make a mistake, I just tell people this is my education. This is my this is me getting a loan and having to pay it back. And so I think that's true. What do you attribute kind of this growth to? How are you solving these issues now in your agency when it comes to you know, flipping that switch and going kind of more towards an easier route or having less friction in the journey? How are you solving that now?
Well, you know, when I look through everything, before I launched my business, I was listening to all these podcasts, and one common theme was you got to have good policies and procedures. You know, you got to have a well-defined customer experience. I've been out of the industry for 8 years. I don't even know what that looks like. Now, I kind of started with how would I want to be treated? And I started coming up with all these great ideas, but to implement them were so cumbersome. I don't have time to, I want to text everybody and say, hey, I know you had a claim, just wanted to follow up to see how your agent, you know, have you been contacted by an adjuster yet? Or I want to call everybody saying, hey, your insurance is coming up, would like to do a review with you. There's only so much time in a day. I've got a 10 and a 7-year-old that run me rampant as well. And, you know, having my family first is really one of the most important reasons that I own my own business. So I didn't want to be the guy that's putting in 18 hours a day at the office. Yeah. And so I started seeking out things that would automate that for me. And I originally, I was like, you know, my CRM, I need to have something where I can better manage my customer relationships. And so that's when I started the investigative process to look at, and I tried 3 or 4 different options before I ended up settling on one. Yeah. I shouldn't say settling, I should say choosing one. I didn't settle. I could have, because there's, you know, but that's how I came across you guys.
Yeah. Well, and you had mentioned something that I think is really important to talk about for agents that are listening to this is, you know, you had mentioned you wanted to send the claim stuff. You wanted to do the renewals. You wanted to make the call. You wanted, you know, we all want to, and I've had this happen to myself, you know, it's like I was going to talk to them about life insurance. That's the one that hits me the most. Somebody dies and you're like, oh, you know, you have that moment where you realize I didn't talk to them about it, you know? And that's, we all have the path to hell is paved with good intentions, right? Like there's so many insurance agents that wanted to, shoulda, coulda, woulda. You know, I think what's important here is you really seeked the solving that deeper rooted issue of it's not about the intentions. We all have those, but you were like, how can I actually make this reality? Right. And you sought that out. And I think that that's the powerful thing. You know, I like to make a lot of analogies to like not gardening, but farming, right? Because growing a business is a lot like a farm. There's no substitute. You know, everybody's trying to find the right mixture of water, all the sexiest fertilizers that'll help the crop. You know, they're trying to make sure that they have this like super high tech soil, but it's like, there's no substitute for time. There's no amount of water that will make up for the time it takes a crop to grow, right? Now, it sounds like you did your work to make sure that you tilled the soil properly, right? You made sure that the soil was ready when you planted the seeds, but you understood it's going to take time, and I can't cut this down too soon. You know, the harvest just takes time, and you didn't hold yourself hostage to that. And I think that that's beautiful, right? It's got to have this. You got to have the seeds. You got to have the soil. You got to have the water. You got to have some fertilizer. But most importantly, you have to have time. And you took that first year, which is a very difficult year. It's I think the hardest year. And you really you made some difficult but strategically intelligent decisions to play the long game. And I think that that's commendable. You know.
Well, you know, to touch on that, patience has never been a virtue of mine, ever. You know, and if you ask for patience, you're going to be given plenty of opportunities to show patience. And so through that process, I knew going into this that I had to submit to the process.
Yeah.
I had to accept mistakes I hadn't made yet because I knew I was going to make them.
Yeah.
And just know that that's part of it. It's part of the growth. You know, yeah, I tried to till the soil the best I could with the knowledge I had, but there was no substitution for the experience. And so if there's agents out there listening to this that are new or scratch, or even if you're working for somebody, just know that it's a process and submit to that process. Don't fight it. Don't try to take the shortcut, because if you shortcut the sacrifice, you're going to shortcut the results.
Yeah.
One of my lifelong mentors has always said there's a product that only comes by way of the process. Right? If you want a certain product, you have to have a process in order to go through that. And sometimes the process is a press. It's a grind. And that's just the way it is, right? If you want to make wine, you got to go through the press. If you want olive oil, you got to go through the press. And but there's a product that is on the other side of that process that if you will be patient with it, if you will adhere to it, if you will not neglect it or think less of it, if you will embrace it, then there's something that is very, very valuable, very precious that can come on the other side of it. And your business is going to start to see the results of it. It's going to reap those rewards because you've done that. You've done what any good business owner needs to do, and when they first start out, and that is you've put in the time, you've put in the effort, you've tilled the soil, and now there's going to be a reward that comes out of that. And you've pivoted where you've needed to pivot. You didn't settle, in your words. You chose something that was going to make you better from a process standpoint, from a technology standpoint, from a dedication standpoint. And now you're going to start to see what is on the other side of that. And that's really, really cool. I think you should get into month 14, 15, 16, 17. And you start to get on the other side of that. There's a light. And that's why we get in this business. You know, insurance is the original lifestyle business. It's the original industry that you could put in a lot of work and you can see the results and the rewards last for years and years and years and years. And it's compounding. And you've put stuff into place now, because most agency owners, JC, they don't get to this point until they're year 10, year 12, year 15. They don't think about it from the lens of, I'm in my very first few months. I need to put this process in place now so that I can see the rewards of it thereafter. And there's a lot of agency owners. Maybe you're an agency owner listening to this and you're kicking yourself. You're thinking, man, I wish I was there years ago. I'm 20 years in, and now I'm just now starting to see the light go off. You know, that's a very real thing. And so I think it's great that you've been at this place now and you recognize it now, so that in year 10, year 12, year 15, you can start to see the real momentum of that. It's a snowball effect that goes from snowball to avalanche really, really quick. And so
that was one of the things, you know, I had a vision for what I wanted this to look like 5-10 years down the road. And I knew that there was going to have to be some things put in place. And much like you said, I think a lot of times people wait for it all to not fall apart, but be complete chaos before they decide to stop, regroup, refocus, hone in, implement some better processes and procedures to standardize things. And, you know, I tell people all the time, I might not be setting the world on fire sales wise. You know, I'm not going to be one of these guys that write $2 million in my first year. And
Sure. But
kudos,
that's one out of a million people.
kudos to those guys. But for me, I said, you know what? I'm going to take my time. I'm going to learn from my mistakes. I'm going to implement the processes because, you know, one of my favorite books is by Jeff Olson. It's called A Slight Edge. He talks about simple daily disciplines compounded over time versus simple errors in judgment is the difference between massive success and massive failure. Things that are easy to do now will be hard to do later, and things that are hard to do now will be easy to do later if you follow those simple disciplines. And so that's really what I focus on, is taking my time to make sure that I craft this experience and have these policies and procedures in a standardized way of doing business now. Because if I didn't, I would get to a point where I'm doing $2 million a year in premium, and now I've got to stop,
tear it all down. Yeah.
And I just didn't want to do that because that would be much more expensive and much more painful than it is to just take my time and do it on the front
end. And I think one of the important things to talk about for the users or for the agents that are listening is, you know, everybody focuses on what's the premium, what's the revenue. But, you know, after being in business and having success, having a lot of failures, I've learned some valuable lessons. Revenue is garbage. It doesn't mean anything. Profit is what matters. But also, and secondarily, is are you living a life you're proud and happy about too? Because it's like, you know, just and this has been kind of a hard thing because I came from not having money. Money is just one dimension of the whole picture, right? It's like you can have money, but what's the opportunity cost for the guy who is writing that $2 million in their first year, right? What did they give up to get that? They didn't get everything, you know. It's like designing your day and designing your life is kind of like playing a video game where at the beginning you have 100 points that you have to allocate to different skills and different, you know, for your character. And there's never enough points to fill every column, right? So if you want to be strong in one thing, you have to be weak in another. And so that's kind of how our time in our life is. And you know, it's like, yeah, sure, you might not be writing $2 million in premium, but what did you get to keep that the other person would have given up? You know, I think that that's also important when you design and build your life, that you kind of, you know, you look at it intentionally like you are building a character that you'd be proud to play as, right?
Yeah, you know, Preston, you and I come from similar. You know, when I was 15, I was living on people's couches in our community because my mom and I found ourselves homeless. My dad died when I was 10. And so I don't come from money either. A lot of times people think, oh, you know, you had it made, you had the easy path. And, you know, like I said, everybody loves the rags to riches story, but nobody wants to read the book. Mm-hmm. And, you know, so that was kind of, I could flip this podcast on it completely on its head and go a different direction right now. But that's why I set my agency up the way that I do now, is because I use my agency as a vehicle for impacting our community. And that's what I'm passionate about. That's my mission is, you know, I partner with nonprofits and take 10% of the revenue and give it back to these organizations. So you want to talk about profit versus revenue and everything else. You know, for me, that's my mission. And people are like, well, you're crazy, JC. You got to take care of your family. I said, you know what? If I follow my mission to its core, my family will be taken care of just fine.
100%.
Absolutely.
You know, and so that's one of the things that really gets me fired up. And that's why it's so important for me to grow this agency the right way, so that I don't lose sight of that. I don't fall in love with the paycheck. Because when your back's against the wall, that paycheck, man, you can cut and run from that easy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, I think that's amazing. I'd love to have you back on the podcast again, just to talk more about that impact that you're having in your community. I think that's fantastic. I'd love to hear more about that. We're a little pressed for time today, but JC, I just want to thank you so much for joining us on today's episode. If people want to connect with you, if they have questions or they just want to bond or connect, where can people connect with you at?
I'm on all the social media platforms.
You're on MySpace?
No, I was.
Friendster?
We talked about old technology. I was on MySpace, man. You got on there. It had a Matt Nathanson song in the background. It was great.
Yeah. Perfect.
Dude,
So
that's
if you
awesome.
want to connect with JC, hit him up on his Tumblr account or his Flickr account. He's on all the social media platforms.
Let me rephrase that. All the major social medias. You
Yeah.
can find me on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, all of those.
There you go.
Or you can connect to me. You can go to our website, Catalyst Insurance, insgrp.com.
Yeah. If you guys are seeking another agent who is just clawing at an opportunity to grow in a really valuable way, JC is a great friend to have on the journey.
Awesome. JC, thank you so much for joining us. Until next time, this has been the Better Agency Podcast. I am Nicholas Ayers. He is Preston Schmidley, and we will see you on the next episode.
Thanks, guys.